Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the crooked forest of Poland, 400 bent pines and zero explanation. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In a forest near Gryfino in northwestern Poland, approximately 400 pine trees grow in an extraordinary way. Each trunk bends sharply northward at ground level, curves horizontally for 1 to 3 meters, then grows straight upward. The bend is perfectly consistent across all 400 trees. Every single one curves in the same direction. Every single one was bent during its first decade of growth, and no written record from the people who planted them survives to explain why. The trees were planted around 1930, when this region was still German territory. The workers who shaped these trees were alive within living memory, yet no account was ever recorded. The plantation sits surrounded by straight pines, making the grove unmistakable from the air. Foresters, timber historians, and dendrochronologists have examined the site since it came to wider attention around 2007. Their conclusion is unanimous on one point: the bending was deliberate. The cause and the reason the trees were never harvested remains officially unexplained. What were 400 carefully shaped pines intended to become? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Human perception is fallible. This is not an insult, it is neuroscience. The brain does not passively record reality, it actively constructs it, filling gaps with expectation, inferring causes from insufficient data, and storing memories that are reshaped by subsequent experience. Eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of courtroom evidence, precisely because what people see and what actually happened frequently diverge. Sound can cause visual hallucinations. Infrasound at specific frequencies can produce feelings of dread, the sensation of a presence, and even visual disturbances. Sleep deprivation, stress, and hypoxia can generate vivid experiences indistinguishable from waking reality. All of this is relevant when evaluating modern mysteries. Many apparently anomalous experiences have prosaic explanations rooted in human neurology: temporal lobe activity, hypnagogic hallucinations, shared social expectation shaping perception. A willingness to consider these explanations is not dismissiveness, it is intellectual hygiene. The brain is capable of generating extraordinarily convincing experiences that have no external cause, and yet, the perceptual explanation has its limits. It cannot account for physical evidence: radiation burns, landing traces, electromagnetic interference on electronic equipment, or anomalous readings on calibrated instruments. When multiple independent witnesses, separated by distance, report identical details, mass hallucination strains credulity. When physical measurements corroborate subjective experience, the neurological explanation is insufficient. These are the cases that demand another look. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the crooked forest of Poland, 400 bent pines and zero explanation is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The crooked forest, known in Polish as Krzywny Las, is located near the town of Gryfino in West Pomerania, northwestern Poland. The site contains approximately 400 bent pine trees growing within a much larger forest of completely straight pines, making the grove immediately identifiable from aerial imagery and creating one of Europe's most visually striking natural anomalies. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered all 400 trees share the same morphology: a sharp northward bend at ground level, a horizontal or near horizontal curved section extending 1 to 3 meters, then a straight upward trunk growing to 15 to 17 meters. The uniformity of direction and curvature across every tree in the grove is the central fact that rules out any random natural cause, such as wind loading. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The trees were planted around 1930, during a period when the region was part of Germany. Dendrochronological analysis confirms the bending occurred during the first 7 to 10 years of each tree's growth, a window consistent with deliberate mechanical manipulation of young saplings before their trunks had hardened sufficiently to resist imposed curvature. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the horizontal section of each trunk curves consistently toward the north. This directional uniformity is critical to evaluating natural explanations. Snow accumulation, soil creep, and prevailing wind effects do not produce uniform northward deflection across hundreds of individual trees across an entire plantation without exception, as wind and weather effects distribute randomly. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the German foresters who planted and tended the grove would have been conscripted when Germany entered World War II in 1939. The trees were approximately 9 to 10 years old at that point, approaching, but not yet reaching harvestable maturity. The war's interruption of agricultural and forestry operations across occupied Europe is well documented, and this plantation likely lost its entire workforce to conscription within months of the war's beginning. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Historical records confirm that bent timber cultivation was practiced in northern European forestry for specialized applications. Curved timber was essential for constructing chair runners, sleigh frames, boat ribs, and certain furniture frames that required wood with natural grain following the curve, a structural property that sawn curved timber lacks. The technique of mechanically guiding young trees into desired shapes was standard horticultural knowledge. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the crooked forest of Poland, 400 bent pines, and zero explanation. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the trees were deliberately cultivated to produce curved timber for furniture frames, sleigh runners, or boat ribs, a well-documented Northern European forestry practice that required mechanically bending saplings during their first years of growth. This is the most widely accepted explanation among timber historians and foresters. Its primary weakness is the complete absence of any written records confirming the intended use or harvest plan. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that heavy snow accumulation during a critical growth period bent the saplings uniformly before they recovered, creating the consistent northward curvature through a natural loading event rather than human intervention. This explanation has been proposed, but is rejected by most researchers because snow loading distributes unpredictably and would not produce the uniform directional bend and consistent horizontal section seen across all 400 trees. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the trees were a deliberate cultivation project whose purpose was interrupted by the onset of World War II before the shaped timber could be harvested, and no documentation survived the administrative collapse of German forestry management in this region after 1945. This synthesis of the timber cultivation theory with the war interruption context is the most complete historical explanation available, though it remains unconfirmed by archival evidence. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the crooked forest of Poland, 400 bent pines, and zero explanation does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence, as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the consistent northward direction of all 400 bends is the strongest evidence against any natural explanation. Random environmental forces, snow, soil movement, wind, produce distributed directional results across a plantation. Uniform northward curvature across every tree in a defined grove can only be produced by a systematic human intervention applied consistently during the sapling's formative years. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Historical documentation from German and Scandinavian forestry archives confirms that bent timber cultivation for sleighs, furniture runners, and boat construction was actively practiced in Northern Europe during the early 20th century. Foresters deliberately shaped young trees by weighting, staking, or mechanical frames, then allowed them to mature before harvesting the finished curved timber, a multi-decade process. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed World War II began in September 1939, when the Gryfino plantation trees were approximately 9 years old, within the window before harvest maturity. German military conscription swept through agricultural and forestry workforces across occupied territories, and the administrative records of many regional forestry projects were lost in the post-war transfer of this territory from Germany to Poland, providing a plausible mechanism for the absence of any surviving documentation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the crooked forest of Poland, 400 bent pines, and zero explanation. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. No definitive written record explaining the crooked forest has been found in German or Polish forestry archives, despite searches by timber historians and regional researchers. The site came to wide international attention around 2007 through internet photography and has since become a tourist attraction managed by the Gryfino municipality. Foresters and dendrochronologists who have examined the trees agree the bending was deliberate and human-caused. The bent timber cultivation hypothesis is the consensus explanation, with the war interruption accounting for why no harvest occurred. The trees are now aging, some are dying, and without intervention the grove may be largely gone within 2 to 3 decades, taking with it the last physical evidence of whatever purpose it was grown to serve. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the crooked forest of Poland, 400 bent pines and zero explanation. From the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Crooked Forest ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.